Hi, everybody. Tonight, I have been able to get my two brother kitties together in my lap, at least for a minute or two. This is Fluffy, everybody knows. This is Fluffy here. This is Chocolate with the chocolate ears. They are the essence of, I think, why life ever started is when you love and cherish, and you cherish it because it is life. And we've talked about that before, and if I'm a little out of breath, I had to run downstairs to get them both, to get them back in this chair to start my Earth Files YouTube channel tonight. So I wanted you all to see Chocolate and Fluffy before I start on something that, after seeing them and how beautiful they are and how wonderful and how much we love our animals, that one of the sad developments just in the last few weeks, and I'm working on it, is that there are more reports of the bloodless half cats now down in the New Orleans and Lafayette and Baton Rouge area. And at earthfiles.com, I will be posting a report soon. And I have tomorrow night on Coast to Coast, I'll be doing 3 hours, starting with missing cattle, about 300 plus in the San Luis Valley of Colorado. And they had a meeting about this in January, the end of January, with the brand inspector from Colorado and New Mexico, a whole lot of people and citizens and ranchers. And for those of you who might not know about the San Luis Valley of Colorado, it extends from Del Norte, and some people call it Del Norte or Del Norte, and that is on the far west. And then on the far east is the famous Mount Blanca. The native Indian tribes who have been in the past centuries living there always talked about lights going in and out of Mount Blanca. It is something that you run into. I lived in Colorado for about 17 years, and I have talked with some of the Native Americans there who themselves have seen lights come in and out of Mount Blanca. And so here's Mount Blanca, and down below, and kind of right at the base of this huge, huge mountain, is the Sand Dunes, Sand Dunes National Park. Very much like White Sands down in southern New Mexico in a funny, strange way, except that these dunes are not white. They are beige, and they look a little bit like the Sahara Desert, all piled up in this one area below Mount Blanca, and to the north is Crestone. Crestone is a very interesting place where people for decades have talked about eerie things happening in Crestone. So the big San Luis Valley, about 50 miles from Del Norte or Del Norte to Mount Blanca and the sand dunes, and then from the north, Saguache, to the south, Alamosa. It's about 50 miles from west to east, and it's about 55 miles from north to south. It's a big valley. And that is where, in September of 1967, that Appaloosa mare named Lady was found dead and stripped of flesh from the neck up. And I was able to talk with Burl Lewis, the owner, in 1988 when I was working on my first book, An Alien Harvest. And he took me back over the whole period and how that was a horse that Nellie, it was hers, and she loved that horse, and that horse was every night at a specific time. They would go out, and Nellie loved to feed Lady every night. And that's how they knew something had happened. Lady missed a meal. And then they sent people out and they couldn't find her, and it went on for 2 or 3 days. They think that whatever happened on September 7th 1967. And that ranch was out of Alamosa, like if you were going Alamosa and up to Mount Blanca and to the sand dunes, and you made it kind of a triangle. The ranch was out from Alamosa going in that direction. And Burl said the thing that just really threw him for a loop, outside of the fact that their beautiful horse looked like it should get up, except that from the neck up, there was nothing but skeleton, literal skeleton. All the tissue had been stripped. But the body looked perfectly fresh. And later on, Dr. John Altschuler from Denver would come and examine the horse and would confirm that inside the chest, that all of the major organs had been removed. And when I say he confirmed, this was all the way into the 1980s when I started working with him. He had been afraid as a young doctor with a family and his career to worry about. He went secretly to the San Luis Valley specifically to see this horse that had made worldwide headlines. And that was by Associated Press, did the first article in October of 1967. And that's how everybody started learning about this strange horse. And that's why Dr. Altschuler secretly went down there. And the sad tragedy is that so many professional people have been so afraid of getting into phenomena such as bloodless, trackless animal mutilations because counter intel has made it so dangerous to investigate these subjects, and that ridicule has been used as a weapon, and that all of this phenomena has been happening for decades, not just in the United States, but around the world. But we're now talking about the San Luis Valley and the amazing horse lady, because as John Altschuler told me back in the 80s when we finally started working together, that he was the doctor identified in one of the news as a doctor from Denver had come to examine the horse. It was John Altschuler. And he said to take out all of those major chest organs, the heart, the lungs, and I believe the liver was gone. I think all the major organs in the chest. And he said, and there was not one sign of any fluid, no blood, nothing. Clean inside chest with the neck stripped. And why I'm starting there tonight is that people forget that in a place like the San Luis Valley of Colorado, it has had reported animal mutilations, probably hundreds by now. People have seen all kinds of strange aerial vehicles, craft, lights. People described in 67, right before a lady was found in that Alamosa ranch. They had been reporting and had been talking to even reporters about these little airplanes that would zip around in the sky, and they didn't know what they were. And some people saw some of these little airplanes dissolve into clouds. And I remember talking with Lou Girotto in the district attorney's office in Trinidad, and he said, we get reports of people saying, I thought it was a helicopter, but it wasn't making any noise, and it got close over my ranch, and then I don't know what happened, but it dissolved into a cloud. That's the kind of strange phenomena that was all a part of the San Luis Valley. And now there has been a meeting in January. 300 plus cattle are missing from the San Luis Valley since the summer of 2017. And that I have talked with a rancher there that I will be having on Coast tomorrow night. And he had not only a mutilated calf, but he had one of his cows that was like a family pet. And when it went missing, and he spent 2 months going everywhere, trying to find any evidence and trying to find her remains, and never could, he told me on the phone just last week or so. He said, that haunted me as much or even more than my mutilated calf. Because, Linda, this was a big, hefty, healthy cow worth about $2,500 when it disappeared about 5 years ago and prices were high on cattle. And he said, I love that animal. It was a Solaire. They're from France, their bloodline, and they're a beautiful red. And he only had 2, and they were always together, separate from his Black Angus and other herd. And when that one just seemed to vanish, he told me about it because I'm now doing these reports, and you will be able to see it, the report tomorrow night and afterward, about the missing cattle situation in southern Colorado that comes over the border into northern New Mexico, where they also have had some missing cattle. And it also reminds me, as the rancher, Mr. Kernan is the way he says his name, he was talking about how he has been haunted by living and working on a ranch in Del Norte or Del Norte, Colorado, at the far western end of the San Luis Valley since he was a child, and today he's 68 years old. So he has basically been ranching his entire life right there in the San Luis Valley in Del Norte. And he said, when you talk with neighbors, and people there have always been very tight-lipped. They don't really talk about some of the unusual things that they've seen or heard or lost. But that he knows that in some of the discussions that there have been very odd lights. Some people have seen these vehicles in the sky. And he was talking to me about this huge disconnect where the ranchers know that they're looking at an animal and there's no blood. An ear, eye, tongue, jaw, genitals, rectum is cored out in the standard mutilation. Or in his calf, very interesting that the spine had been selectively pulled out and a perfect circle taken from around the eye and the ear. But that removal of the spine, I have heard of cases like that in Iran and Iraq and in the Middle East, associated with the presence of something highly, highly strange. And that was a calf in the San Luis Valley. And as I thought back to when I was working on A Strange Harvest and doing that documentary beginning in the fall of '79, and thinking about all of the, seems like thousands of miles that I have walked in this strange phenomena, and today, as we move into almost April now of 2018, more cases are coming in various parts of the planet. And I remember meeting a sheriff, George Yarnell. He was the sheriff of Colorado Springs, or that area. It was not Colorado Springs, but it was a small town. It was Elizabeth, Colorado. And there had been, when I was working on the documentary, there had been a lot of very strange observations of silver discs, beams of light, a Sasquatch, all kinds of bizarre things had been happening around Elizabeth, Colorado. And people were calling up the sheriff and saying, this is what I saw, this is what is happening. And then came all the mutilations. So the crew and I were with George Yarnell at one of the bone, they call them bone piles, that was a mutilation that he had investigated. And Sheriff Yarnell, like a John Wayne character, speaking only in 6 to 10 word sentences, and you'd then ask him another question. He was telling us about what he had seen, how he had tried to investigate, how he himself had carved on an animal with his knife, and he knew this was the mutilation, and that he carved out the mutilator's cut, and he knew where his knife cut was, and he knew where the mutilator's cut, and it went to a laboratory. And when he got back the results, even where his knife was, they had reported that both excisions were predator. And he knew for a fact that he had taken his own knife and had cut on one part to get out the mutilator's cut. And he was so disturbed that the laboratory gave him a false report that he met with the governor of Colorado, he told me, and the head of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation about that. So George Arnell is giving me his sense of frustration of being a sheriff who was trying to deal with a lot of strange things, and including these bloodless mutilations. And he said, I want you to know that one night I got permission from the airport, Colorado Springs, and that area where Elizabeth is. And he said, I wanted a deputy to come with me as a witness. And I wanted the pilot to fly over a certain area that we had mapped where there had been repeated mutilations. And he said, all I wanted to do was get permission to be able to go up, be over the land where we knew that we had these repeated problems. And then I wanted legally to be able to shut off all of our lights in the sky. And I wanted to see if flying completely lightless, would we see anything, what could we learn being completely camouflaged in darkness? So the sheriff said he's sitting in the back left, his deputy is in the front right, the pilot, it was like a Piper Cub, small plane. And they had orientation as the sun went down about where they were, and the whole idea was to stay in the dark without their lights on. And he said they had earphones, they could hear each other. And that the sound that came was so loud from the pilot, and it was a swear word, like, oh, look at that. And he could see that the pilot in front of him was looking to the left, so he looks out. And he said, Linda, I had been looking down, and there were the lights. We could see lights from little roads and some of the houses, and so we had been seeing some lights in the dark. And I couldn't see anything. It was solid black. And then I realized the pilot is doing this. And then I could see that there was a circle of solid darkness. And he yelled to his deputy, look on that side. And the deputy looks on the right side. And they both could see that right underneath this little plane was a big, solid, black disc, circle. And he said, it makes me shiver, because it was like what we want to understand, what we want to find, what we want to be able to monitor is what is doing these mutilations. And he said, if it is UFOs and something from outer space, it's like it knew what I was trying to do, that we were going to go up there in the dark and we were going to fly without lights. And then this big circle thing comes right under us, completely dark. We never saw it approach. It's the pilot who saw the edge, and that circle stayed under us. And I told the pilot, turn on your lights and let's land. And he said as soon as they turned back on all of their plane lights, whatever this was disappeared. It didn't take off. It just disappeared. And so the lights in the little towns below, they could see them again. And Sheriff George Arnell, looking at me with his steely blue eyes, telling me this, he said, whatever we are dealing with, Linda. I don't know what it wants with all these mutilated animals, but I am now convinced something in that black circle could read my mind. And that is the territory that I've been trying to understand and bring some pressure of fact and evidence for, it's almost 40 years now. And I've learned a lot, but what I don't know could fill this universe. And part of what I'm going to keep doing on Earth Files YouTube channel, as many Wednesday nights as I can, is to share with you both current news and some of these, I'm going to say, it's like looking at some of the pieces of a life where it was formative and what I was learning then that helps me fill in today in this very revolutionary time in which I'm hoping that 2018 we're at least going to change the whole paradigm to we're not alone in this universe and that there are alien presences that interact with this planet. And even the mutilations, if we knew the truth and the facts, it might not be such a dark story if we just knew the truth. Or it might be. That's the challenge. What is the truth about the bloodless and often trackless animal mutilations around this planet that have been going on? I have found a record that goes back to 1911, where there were 104 sheep that were reported dead, ear, eye, tongue, jaw, genitals missing on a billabong in Australia. That's as far back as something like that I've been able to find in a record. Most of the media will start in newspapers around the late 1950s, and then you get to 1967, the San Luis Valley, the horse, the Appaloosa lady, stripped of flesh and all organs removed, no blood, and the closest tracks that Burl Lewis said that he ever found was 100 feet from where her body was found, and that when he examined those tracks, it looked like she had reared up only on her back legs, and that she went into a frenzy. He was looking at frenzied back hooves, and he conjectured that the horse raised up to something. And we'll never know exactly what happened. So, in this next week and going forward, because the half-cats and missing cattle and other mutilations are beginning to surface again, I would just like to extend to all of you who are listening, it helps me so much to hear from you, as so many people have been getting in touch with me about what I reported last week, about the title, something strange in Oregon, something is off because of the missing birds. And I have been getting, I don't know now, dozens and dozens of emails from people beyond Oregon, in other parts of the United States, in Canada, Australia, in Europe. And they are describing their own description of a completely different environment than where they grew up if they've lived there a long time. And this is so valuable to get your feedback, and I'm going to be doing a great deal more on what could be happening in Oregon and beyond, and going to people like ornithologists and biologists and people who might be able to give us a reality check on just how much phenomena or how different is the current environment in a lot of places from what it was even 10 or 15 years ago. So I'm going to be reporting about that in the next few weeks as well. Anybody who hears about an unusual death of an animal, that there's no blood and that there are precise excisions please get in touch with me. And if you prefer confidentiality, I always respect and honor everybody's requests for confidentiality, and I would never give out a name or a location unless I had permission. So never hesitate to get in touch with me about a subject that you feel sensitive about. And with that, going from a sort of mysterious and sort of dark and sort of a confusing subject that is so important that we all be able to talk about straightforwardly, I would like to open it up to your questions and comments now through Lori Moriarty, who Lori and her husband Michael make this Earth Files YouTube channel possible each Wednesday. They're in Phoenix, I'm in Albuquerque, and we've had, as some of you know, we've had some digital rumbling problems with getting the picture or the sound, but we're going to keep trying to do this, and hopefully if it's digital problems naturally, that's one thing. If it's somebody trying to interfere, we're just going to keep trying to put one foot in front of the other and keep doing this. So hopefully tonight our audio and our video are working. And Lori, let's take some questions.
Great. And before we get started, we do have quite a few very, very generous people to thank for super chats. Nicholas Krupas, Angie C., Rick Owen, Lawrence Miller, Billy Rumbug, Kicking Back in OC, Kristen Seibel, and Vicky Ledgegard. Thank you so much for your support tonight.
Yeah, thank you, you guys. Everything helps.
Our first question is, does Bigelow's ties to NASA and Senator Harry Reid put a different light on him owning Skinwalker Ranch and NIDS?
You know, it's a very good question, and I've got two branches that immediately came to mind, and the first one is to tell you how Robert Bigelow heard about the Skinwalker Ranch in the first place in Utah. It goes all the way back to Art Bell and me first doing Dreamland, and then in 95 we had started doing Coast. And this was, I believe the year was 1996. And it was a guy who was in Utah who was always getting in touch with me about mutilations, lights, UFO sightings in Utah. And he's the one who called me up and said, I want to put you in touch with this Mr. Sherman. That was the real name of the owner. They're having all kinds of red lights up around their house, and it's scaring his wife to death. They have had mutilations. They have had Sasquatch. They have had, and he went on and on. And that's how I came to do a recorded interview with Mr. Sherman of the Sherman Ranch that you know today as the Skinwalker Ranch. And why this is important to go back is that on that tape, it's on a radio broadcast that would probably be somewhere in the Art Bell Coast to Coast or Dreamland files somewhere. He told me that one night he had become so frustrated because his family was so upset at everything that was happening. And he was looking through a powerful scope on a rifle. And he was looking at yellow, I believe they were round, lights. And he knew that one of these, as he said, you know, the GD cuss word, were down in one of his pastures that he could see because the house was raised a little bit. And so he's looking at it through his gun sight. And he said, I just got so angry. He said, I just started running. I ran the whole way. I don't know what I thought I was going to do when I got there. And then when I got close, I realized I thought it was on the ground. I thought it was on my land. It was up in the air, but not very high. I think he thought it was maybe 100, 200 feet. And whatever this craft was, Sherman is describing for me, recorded and went out in the radio, that he's gets right under it and that he just wanted to yell, "Leave me alone." And whatever it was that was inside of this craft, he felt suddenly like something was interacting with him. And then he could see two humanoids. He described them as, he thought they looked sort of human, like a normal human in clothes, but not exactly either. And he said it came into his mind. And of course, we would know this is telepathy, but it came into his mind. He heard two voices. They were different. And one voice said something like, he interpreted it, "Let's show him." And that the other voice said, "He would never understand what we are doing. No." Now, that went on the radio on either Dreamland or Coast to Coast in 1996. And Bob Bigelow, I guess, heard it. And it was very shortly after that that I understand that he approached Sherman to buy that ranch to do the experimentation. Now, the National Institute for Discovery Science, he was in the process of forming in 1994. And so there was a confluence of interests. He had been extremely helpful, so people will understand. He had been extremely helpful to me and to George Knapp and to various people. He took a great deal of interest in our work. He seemed to come first from a genuine personal interest in the near-death experiences, in the UFO phenomena, and a variety of unusual interactions with the world around us. When he did NIDS, and then at the same time, I think Bigelow Aerospace was coming into to being somewhere in and around the time that either he did NIDS or after, that he always was a man who thought in terms of you come up with something that will be constructive. He's a very positive thinking person to fill an answer to something. So now I understand the question, was Robert Bigelow right from the very beginning, before NIDS and going back when he bought the Skinwalker Ranch after my report on with Art Bell, was it because he was secretly working for an agency and that he was a good cutout between the intel world and the corporate world or the company world or the business world, and that right from the beginning he had always been interfacing? I don't know. That's speculation. But whatever was the source of his concept on the blow-up rooms that could go out into the Lagrange point and circle around, and that was the first idea that we heard, that it would be launching from the Earth and going out to the Bigelow Aerospace blow-up rooms, as like this would be like a hotel room that you could orbit around between the moon and the Earth, and the Lagrange will hold you in that place because it's a gravitational balance. Or to get them to the moon with NASA to use as labs and as places where astronauts would stay. That was another part. And now, it was only a couple years ago that he did an interview with George Knapp in Las Vegas, and where they both are based. And Bob confirmed for George on the air, I've listened to the interview, that he had a contract with NASA to be a developer using the Bigelow Aerospace blow-up rooms on Mars. And so, whatever the original, we'll say, context was for Robert Bigelow to contact some of us, evolve and help our work, move into NIDS, move into Bigelow Aerospace, he now has a company that is one of the few on Earth that has the ability legally to go to the moon and go to Mars and develop real estate. And so I look at this as a huge positive. And when I saw his 60 Minutes interview with Lara Logan about a year or so ago, I guess it was a year, March of 2017, I think, and he's showing her the Bigelow Aerospace and talking about the blow-up buildings, and the discussion moved to his interest in UFOs and ETs. And when he said to her, almost with kind of a tired, fatigued, why don't we get past, that was the feeling. Why, when she asked him about the UFOs and ETs, and he said, they're right under our noses. And she said, well, aren't you concerned that people would think that you were crazy to say something like that? And he said on 60 Minutes, so I'll say it here now, I really don't give a damn. And I share that total frustration that Robert Bigelow expressed. There are so many people in the government and the military who feel exactly the same way. Why can't we get past the policies of denial, the using ridicule and sarcasm as manipulating controllers to keep the subjects boxed up away from the general world? So I think that if Robert Bigelow is doing his work as an American civilian large company owner, or as a bridge to an intelligence agency, more power to them. Because we're on a planet that, whether we have alien intelligences that have been here for millions of years, manipulating genetic material and living underground, living underwater, wherever, and with bases going out through the solar system and beyond into the Milky Way, we humans have got to make this huge shift, that we're not alone in this universe. We never have been. And that we're at that very dicey, strange intersection where we've had for 70 years government, military, and intel, where their job was to keep everything away from the civilian world because they were afraid that the stock market would crash, religions would collapse, that the whole world would sort of fall apart if they were told that, yes, we're not alone in the universe. And it's much more complex than that headline. I am the first to say that. But if Robert Bigelow can help move the needle to the next big paradigm, that we are just one humanoid life form in a universe teeming with life, which remote viewers have been saying for 3-4 decades, Ray, because we can't keep living on Earth totally manipulated and kept in the dark about issues as important as where we started tonight. If half-cats, mutilated animals, are part of an interaction between an alien intelligence, wouldn't it be so much better? Wouldn't we all be stronger if we all knew the reasons why? So that's my starting point. Why I do the work that I do at Earth Files and Ancient Aliens and this Earth Files YouTube channel, and the books I have done and the documentaries that I've done, and I think it's 5,000 audios that I have done for various radio shows. And the reason is that I can't personally feel that there's anything that is more important in understanding who we humans are than to get to the real truth and the real facts of what our original source really is. And if advanced intelligences going back 270 million years, or some people put it back 500 million years, that there have been a variety of intelligences advanced enough to bend space and time, move in and out of dimensions, not strictly extraterrestrial biological entities in the Milky Way galaxy or this universe, because they move in and out of dimensions. I don't understand how we're going to continue to evolve on planet Earth away from violence and away from putting everything, or trying to put everything, in old historic boxes and keeping them there as if that is the truth and that's the way this world should live. Because it's not the truth. So, as those young people have been on television protesting AR-17s and guns and moving huge crowds, we, all of us, it doesn't matter age, education, racial group, profession, education, none of that is as important as all of this planet moving onto a single huge paradigm square where all together we learn with Xi, with Putin, Trump, Macron, and around all of the leaders of the planet. Maybe a global satellite news conference in every city, every village, everywhere. We're not alone. You don't have to be afraid. We've been studying this for a long time. We're sorry. We apologize that we have had to lie. We've had policies of denial. We have used ridicule. We have used sarcasm. But now it's 2018. And we can stand up in front of you and we can tell you that we know that we have allies and those allies can help us. But in order for us to move forward from this time together on a planet that will thrive instead of collapse with entropy into totalitarian governments, we have to have everybody, all humans on planet Earth, come to know at the same time we're not alone. There are other intelligences. And from here on out, as we race to Mars and race to the moon, it's a race only for us humans. Because we have knowledge of other intelligences that have been through this solar system before the first standing up primate ever took breath. That is the truth. And all of you on the other side of this little camera, I can imagine you all saying, but Linda, we need the proof. In the 4 books that I have done, An Alien Harvest, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 1, Facts and Eyewitnesses, Volume 2, High Strangeness, the 4th, Mysterious Lights and Crop Circles. I think that if you gave each of those books a fair shake, there's proof. It's just not globally known and accepted. So if all of us can keep working together to keep sharing as much honestly as possible, and that all of you know that I am trying really hard, and have always been trying really hard, to get to the pressure of fact and to report whatever the truth is about who we are, how we actually really came to be. I personally think that the future could be exciting. So that's the note that I'd like to leave on tonight, and that's the note that I hope that you will continue to come to Earth Files YouTube channel, where any Wednesday, it could be any subject, past, present, or future. Thanks so much, and thanks from Fluffy and Chocolate.
The lights off.